Maybe I should have some shades, sunglasses today, like you see on the documentaries about dodgy monks. I think not. Maybe I'll close my eyes for some of this talk. It's not because I've gone weird and trying to look particularly spiritual, but the sun is rising and just in front of me. I thought some clouds may pass, but the sky has become a beautiful blue, as you can probably see behind me. Hello and welcome. Namaste. I haven't learnt the hello yet for Sri Lanka, but Bayubawan or something. Ayubawan. It's very different to Namaste. Anyway, welcome. And, this is the point of my talk today. I must look at the time. It is 43, so 07:43. And returning from Pindapat, arms around, what I was going to say is I have to check the time because I can talk about Dharma. There's an English expression, until the cows come home. I try not to use too many of these quaint English expressions, bearing in mind that some of the audience, if not most of them, are not of English origin. Therefore, they make no sense. So the expression, I can do something until the cows come home, is referring to waiting at the end of the day in the dairy on a farm for your cows to just naturally return of their own accord, for you to milk them, relieve them of their full udders of milk, having grazed on beautiful lush green grass all day, something like this. And you could be waiting a long time because cows enjoy grazing. And grazing is a very interesting analogy which we can apply to ourselves in a dharmic sense in relation to our perceived needs, but really what are our wants. Now, what made me think of this, as will happen more and more when I go on charaka, which is wandering, I encounter things throughout the day which bring to mind the Dharma. As I said, I can talk about the Dharma until the cows come home because it's not that it's my favourite subject. It is what I've renounced my ordinary life, my previous life, for the practice of sila, trying to keep the precepts, moral virtue, samadhi, practicing meditation, and developing wholesome mind states, reducing unwholesome mind states. Developing wisdom, panya, sila, samadhi, panya. And through this practice, we also study the teachings of the Buddha, the suttas, the Pali in this tradition, Pali language, the Pali canon, the collection of the Buddha's scriptures, Buddha's teachings, which amount to an incredible number, albeit they represent what is the simplest of teachings that the Buddha offered, and that is that there is suffering and an end of suffering. And this suffering is, the root of this suffering is the cause. So if we find the cause of suffering, we get to the root of the suffering, we find this end of suffering. And he gave us this way, this path, this practice of sila, samadhi, panya, in order to do that. And this path is eightfold, has 8 parts: of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation, which represents sila, moral virtue, as more than half of it, and meditation as the next part, and right view, where it begins, being the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, not just in an intellectual, knowledgeable way, learning that there is suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering in 25 different languages. No, not that. It's knowing this experience yourself of suffering. Now, my experience of charaka in the past, or tudong, wandering, you encounter difficulties, unpleasantries, things that aren't ideal necessarily for your practice. We're not going looking for the perfect meditation spot with the perfect sunset or the ideal tree to sit under. We're putting into practice what we have learnt in the monastery, in those situations which are designed to be conducive to our meditation practice. We're picking that up, our toolbox of practices in meditation, taking it with us on our wandering, on our journey, to use in practical everyday life. And this is the wonderful thing about charaka, the wonderful thing about tudong, the wonderful thing about wandering. Because you get to really experience life and its raw edges, because we don't have the creature comforts of most travellers as monks. We don't have traveller's checks or money or credit cards to just book into a hotel using booking.com or something of this nature. We don't have a travel agent. We don't have coaches, buses, tour operators to rely on, or resorts to stay in. We literally have to walk aimlessly from A to B in the hopes that someone will firstly feed us, and that at the end of this walking of a day we can find somewhere to shelter and sleep for a few hours at night. So it's a very interesting and useful way to experience life in the most reality that you can experience life. Also, for a foreigner in a different culture, there is that to deal with too. Different foods, different languages, just a different attitude and way of life. So wandering back from Pindapat, I saw a cow. In fact, I saw a few cows, as you do. In India, in the suttas, it's full of analogies, stories, teaching these simple teachings of the Buddha, of suffering and the end of suffering. In 184,000 suttas, that's all he teaches, but in very different ways to very different people. So we have this, these teachers have this wonderful ability, similarly to Jesus, for instance, teaching about reaping and sowing and casting one's nets and fishing. He's applying the teachings of his Christianity to either fishermen or farmers in different ways that they will understand using these analogies. And the Buddha likewise did the same of his time. So a lot of teachings do refer to cows, because there are a lot of cows in India wherever you go. Different kinds of cows in different places, but there are cows which are respected much the same as wandering monks, as holy. So they are given priority, given right of way, and quite well cared for. This is why it's a very lovely country for monks to live in, like myself, why I come here, why I'm here now. Unfortunately, I can't stay here for as long as I'd like to. The government won't allow that. But even though I am a monk, I'm not a cow. Maybe if I was a cow I could. But without being a cow, I can't get a cow visa or even a monk visa. So I will go travelling again to somewhere where I can stay more permanently. But this in mind, coming back from, like in the suttas, there's the wonderful story of Bahir, who went to the Buddha asking 3 times for ordination or to the teaching, but the Buddha was having his meal, not wanting to have to give a desana or a dharma talk at that particular time, being an inappropriate time. Eventually he conceded after the 3rd request, as the Buddha always does in these stories, and Bahir, on hearing the Buddha's teachings, which were quite simple, like just know seeing as seeing, hearing as hearing, smelling as smelling, tasting as tasting, touching as touching, something simple like that. Through many previous lifetimes of developing parami, he became an arahant, and received the Ehi Bhikkhu ordination, which is basically the ordination in the Buddha's time was as simple as that. He would say Ehi Bhikkhu, which is, go homeless one. That's it. You've come to me, I've given you the Dharma, you now go and practice. So this is a very wonderful way of receiving ordination directly from the Buddha. Now, of course, only the Buddha can do this. Now it's a much more complicated procedure and takes a long time. But receiving this kind of Ehi Bhikkhu ordination from the Buddha meant that Bahir could go with his robes he'd brought with him and his bowl, or maybe there was a delay. I think he maybe had to go and find some different robes or a different bowl because something wasn't quite correct. I'm not sure on the accurate details of the story. That's not the point of what I'm talking about today. But anyway, he went off only to be mown down by a cow in the road, in the lane, on the path. So he's walking off with all good intentions, having ordained or about to ordain, really become an arahant, seen the way of the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, because of his practice in previous lives. This is why people became instantly arahants when receiving direct Desana's teachings from the Buddha in those times, because of previous causes and conditions they had put in place. They finalize their practice. They reach the final level of attainment, which is arahantship. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those levels of attainment today. The cow ran him over, mowed him down, dead. And I can't remember what happens next, but he's reborn into another existence, I would imagine, where he'll stand a better chance of perhaps attaining to NIBBÄNA. But he was an arahant anyway, and whether he'd actually become a monk even, I'm not quite sure at this point, but I think so. He had really achieved what he'd set out to achieve, despite his unfortunate and untimely end as the result of a cow's, accidentally, nothing bad intentionally. This cow was just, they're big things, they move quickly, if you get in their way, they're going to mow you down. So, on this point, returning, it was actually yesterday morning, not this morning, but returning from Pindapat, alms round, there were some cows in the field, and there are always cows in the field, and they were grazing, 3 cows, grazing very happily. This is what cows do, continuously graze all day long. They don't just sit down for breakfast, then stop, have lunch and then stop. They continually graze, unless rain is coming, and then they may sit. But here there's not much rain, so they're continually grazing. Much like people in this day and age, either grazing on food, the nutrition of food, or entertainment. I could say the nutrition of entertainment, but it's not so much nutrition, it's not necessarily good for you. It could be listening to Dharma, which is the nutrition of the mind, feeding food for the mind. But continually grazing through lack of ability or desire desire of a good nature, chanda, not to be confused with tanha, which is the desire of an unwholesome nature. Tanha is like thirst, craving, that desire, whereas chanda is a wholesome desire for wanting to meditate, wanting to be kind to others, wanting to give dana, this kind of wholesome desire. So, anyway, I've lost the track of what I was saying, but the desire to, so yes, the tanha, thirst for entertainment, is quite different from the desire to listen to Dharma, albeit one can use Dharma, and I think especially in this day and age where there is so much of it available, as a way of distracting oneself. Oh, well, I'm listening to Dharma, so it's okay. Well, it's not really okay if that's all you're doing all day, if you're not sitting without listening to anything at all. Now, the practice of meditation is just that, to actually just sit and experience and learn the Dharma through what is your best educator, your best teacher. And that is within this, as the Buddha described, this fathom-length body, this fathom-length bag of skin filled with horrible things is your greatest teacher. It tells you everything. We look inside for what we are looking to learn, not going out seeking. So whether we're in the monastery or we're on Charaka, the opportunity to just sit, close our eyes and absorb ourselves into a meditation object of, say, the breath, in order to prevent the discursive thinking, papancha, this monkey mind, one thought leading to another, to another, to another, in order to allow that to settle and our minds to become calm, our bodies to settle and relax. This is the practice of meditation. This is the true development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. Now, out of these cows, there were 3, all grazing happily and calmly. Very lovely to see, eating nice fresh grass. There's some nice grass around here. And one cow, quite a little bit separate from them, but not far, still in the same field, was charging around and around furiously, like this, snorting its nose. And at first I thought, oh, this is a bull. It's been put in with these cows to do what bulls do with cows. So I really need to not be in its way, or I will end up like Bahir, flattened, not yet an arahant, but dead all the same. And I'll have to start this whole process again of being born, learning to feed, walk, speak, then go to school, and then college, and then maybe even university, then have a career, and then decide after a successful career, oh, this isn't any good, I'm not getting contentment, then to start all over again being a monk again. I'd have to go through that all again. So I thought, let's keep out of the way of this cow, because this isn't my aim. My aim is to try and become free from suffering in this lifetime, not really be flattened by a cow. At least let's attain some level of enlightenment towards the upper end before this cow, this bull, flattens me, kills me. It'd also be most inconvenient for my family back home. Although there are preparations, I've put in place, what should we say, means for them to repatriate my body or whatever's necessary after my death, being as I'm getting on a little. But it's still going to be most inconvenient for others, and I always try to be of very little impact on other people's lives in that way. If I can share the Dharma with people, then that's a different thing again entirely. But this one cow is charging round furiously, round and round, and I saw its udders, so I knew it was a cow, not a bull. But a cow can still be dangerous, so I took a little bit of a wide berth. Anyway, I noticed it was tethered. It had a tie, a string, a rope, to a peg in the ground. And this is one analogy, one illustration the Buddha uses very appropriately to explain what it is that ties us in life to suffering. And we call these the fetters. It's a kind of old-fashioned English word, fetters, so what's the Pali word for fetters? I'm not sure. It's not kilesas, that's defilements. Fetters? You'll have to look that one up. Google fetters, the Pali word, or if you have the Pali dictionary, I'll be doing it straight afterwards, or it might come to me. I know it, it's gone on the tip of my tongue, as they say. But the English word fetters is an old-fashioned English word for ties. So what is it that ties us to suffering? Now, if we understand there's suffering, and there's also an end of suffering, why do we continue to suffer? Well, because we're like the cows. We like to graze. We continually top up our wants rather than our needs. So I'm a monk, I'm a human being the same as you. I have just one meal a day, in the morning, before noon. Now, you might say, well, okay, you don't do much, but I do walk a lot of distance. I have a lot of physical exercise just by the fact I live on the floor. So everything I do requires me to get up from the floor, a lot of energy. So it's not a sedentary life. You have to be quite physically fit to be a monk, especially a Dhutanga monk with these extra practices, or a Kamatana monk, one whom is really practicing a particular kind of way, a work. My work is intense practice of samadhi, meditation, intense practice of these extra Dhutanga asceticisms that the Buddha allowed, of which there are 13, so living outside under a tree, having just the one meal, not a breakfast early in the morning, only eating once out of one bowl, not having separate courses. You know, these things. Now, if I can live like that on one meal, so can actually anybody, because I'm not a superhuman. I'm just ordinary like you, like anyone else. But we've become accustomed to eating regularly through the day, in, say, breakfast, lunch, and in the evening. And most people these days also throughout the day, with snacks, Mars bars, Snickers or marathons as they used to be called. And what are those things I really like? Picnics. They're nice. I haven't had one of those for so long. You can get a kind of version of that here, but chocolate's not a good thing in India. It melts. You see, it's not kept right. You can't keep it cool. Anyway, my mind, you see, going off to these sensual desires, these pleasures of taste and that kind of satisfaction. But when you try and satisfy that kind of satisfaction, that taste, it just creates craving for more, like all of these tanhas, these unwholesome desires. So we've become accustomed to 3 meals and grazing throughout the day, much like the cows. But it isn't 100% necessary. You can too, just live on 1 meal, thus freeing up much in terms of resources. Money, for one. Time, another. And the mind, because you're most of the time thinking about what you're going to eat next, or discussing and talking about what you're going to eat next. So if you're having lunch, you're thinking about what to have for dinner, where to get dinner, where to go for dinner, or discussing it even. Much of your day is taken up with food. If you eat just once, you're so hungry you don't care what you eat. Rice and dal and some vegetables, not much. I have the same every day here for the last now, how many days left? 30? So 90, so 60 odd days. That's all I've had. Well, that's generally all I have. In Thailand it's a much more varied diet because the lay people bring so much food. A little too much really, you just don't know what to eat. But here it's very simple, rice and dal, as in a runny soup version of dal, and some vegetables each and every day. But I enjoy it, I love it, I really appreciate it every day because I'm so hungry by the time I eat it. So this is the opposite, if you like, to great grazing. And it's actually the way the Buddha taught us to live. It's what is prescribed, not only in our training rules, our teaching, but it's one of our rules that we cannot eat after noon. However much we eat in the morning, after 12 o'clock, when the sun's at its meridian, we have to stop. I'm hoping the sun will go a little higher, a little more quickly, above this tree, and I will have the benefit of the shade of this tree, which at the moment I'm not getting. This is just a form of suffering, desire not to have the sun shining in my eyes so brightly, which is as a result of ignorance for sitting here in the first place, of course. But it was termite free for a change, and I take that opportunity to sit here because it's a nice place to sit and talk to you. So this cow is charging around furiously, round and round and round, whilst the other 3, its friends, its sisters, are just grazing normally, peacefully and calmly, looking like they're having a really lovely day. And I notice, well, it's because it's tied to this stick, this post. Now, exactly why this was the case, I don't know, and I will not know. But the result of its being tied to this tether, or fetter, if you like, to this post, was creating huge amount of suffering. It had as much of the field to graze on within the length of its rope as any of the other cows. No less, no more. It was a field that was such that its only restriction was the rope and the post and the other cows. Without the rope and the post, it still would have grazed on exactly the same spot, without a doubt. There was no need for it to be tethered, other than it may have been a bit of an unsociable cow, and it was tethered for that reason, I'm not sure, or had a tendency to run away, let's say. So that could have been the reason. Anyway, being tethered meant it had to run around furiously, fighting the fact it was tethered. Now this is what we're doing with our tethers, our fetters. And what are these fetters? Well, these are what we need to cut. We need to cut that rope so that we're not charging around like the angry cow, so that we can be calm like the calm grazing cows with their full udders. we need to cut that rope. The cow, it needs to cut that rope before it's ever going to calm down. It will still just stay on the same spot, eat the same grass, have the same life. But as long as it's tied, it's got those constraints. It is this that brings us back to suffering. Now, what are those fetters? There are 10. I've got to check my list in case I forget one or two, which I'd have a tendency to do. But the first 3 are easy. And when we can cut those first 3 tethers, oh look, I've got cows behind me. I hope you can see them. Most appropriate for the conversation. The first 3 are easy to remember because we're working on this continuously to attain to the first level of enlightenment, which they call Sotapanna, or stream entry. Now, the first fetter, there are 10. I'll go through them quite quickly, not the whole practice and the details of how we cut these tethers. They need to be really looked at through our practice over a long period of time. But just to sum up what it is that's destroying this cow's state of mind, giving it unwholesome mind states, making it rush around angrily. What it is that makes it so different to those calm, untethered cows, which are not arahants, anagamis, sakadagamis, or sotapannas. They're just cows. But by all intents and purposes, one can draw that as a very good analogy to the difference of someone running around in samsara aimlessly, rather than just enjoying what they have in the current and present moment, grazing like those peaceful, calm cows with equanimity. So the fetters, there are 10. And in the first stage of enlightenment, Sotapanna, we have to firstly get rid of, let's say, abandon. Not get rid of. Get rid of means implies you're really having to do something about it. But what we have to let go of, abandon, put down, is this idea that we are this personality. It's called in the Pali Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view, meaning that we think that, for example, I think I am this monk sitting here talking to you in India, which of course physically and to all intents and purposes I am, but this is only as a result of causes and conditions that have been put in place, I have put in place through my own actions of body, speech and mind, only within this lifetime or previous lifetimes, for this situation to arise as it is in the current moment. This is vipaka, the results of karma, karma being the actions that we have performed of body, speech and mind. If they are wholesome, the results should be good. If they're unwholesome, the results may well be bad. There's no way to work this one out specifically. It can happen, come back and get you, or not within this lifetime or future lifetime. You can have to be responsible for bad actions quickly, or it may take a long time for you to have to accept that responsibility. We cannot know, and it's not worth wasting time trying to work it out. Just know if we do good, we'll get good, do bad, we'll get bad. But our personalities are not what we are. These are the results of our causes and conditions. As I was a very different person 15 years ago as a businessman, family man, whatever I was doing in my home country, living that life, before I'd started meditation, before I'd started or understood Buddhism and the teachings of the Buddha, I was the result of those conditions and those causes at that time. Now, I believe that as a result of causes and conditions put in place in a previous life, then I must have done something for me to have ended up where I am now, in this form, as a Buddhist monk, because I didn't and wasn't born into a culture of Buddhism. I knew nothing about Buddhism or of Buddhism, quite to the contrary, in the way that I led my life up until I discovered meditation, which led to Buddhism. So there must have been something in place to give the momentum for my life to take this direction. However, that's another subject. When one accepts that, we are not ourselves, so the principle of anatta, not self, which is part of right view, this understanding of anicca, impermanence, dukkha, that suffering I was talking about, and then anatta, not self. This is the 3 characteristics of our existence This is part of right view in the Noble Eightfold Path, or wisdom in Panya, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. When we understand that, we are able to let go of personality view, put it down, abandon it. That's the first of the fetters. Now secondly, there is doubt. Doubt being of these truths, the Four Noble Truths, and these fundamental or characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. If you have any doubt about those, you need to really look deeply into what those things mean. Can you really say there is no suffering? Of course there is suffering. However good a time you're having, it will come to an end. Whatever next best thing you've acquired, it will soon not be the best. There will be a better version. There is always suffering. We will be parted from what we hold dear to us. This is inevitable. We are subject to aging, sickness and death. There is suffering. It's the undisputable truth. So we should not have doubt in that, but often we have doubt in it as such as in terms of our activities are not led with that in mind. They're led with blind faith or hope, which leads me on to the next one, rites and rituals, prayer and worship. If we're praying to a god, or we're even bowing to the Buddha and chanting all day long in the temple, thinking this meritorious behaviour will mean we will become free from suffering in this lifetime, then we're doing it with the wrong understanding. We should be doing that with the idea of practicing mindfulness, remembering the Buddha, recollecting the Buddha, a reflection of the qualities, the 9 qualities of the Buddha, for instance in the Itipiso chant, or reflecting on the qualities of the Dharma, and also the Sangha, his lineage of monastics whom are continuing to this day to propagate those teachings, the Dharma. This reflection is what we should be doing in the temple as Buddhists. We're not praying to a god to help us win the lottery, or to get the next job, promotion, or to pass our exams, or for our uncle's heart operation to go well. We are, with all good intentions, sincerely wishing that that will be the case. But we cannot pray or ask for that. All we can ask for is an understanding of the teachings which we can bring about ourselves, which are the true guide as to how to do it ourselves. The Buddha didn't leave us this false hope. He left us an instruction book of how to achieve these things ourselves. Not to win the lottery, that requires an element of chance or luck, but how to skillfully make a good living, how to skillfully remain healthy, how to skillfully learn, become intellectual and pass your exams, and how to skillfully attain that next promotion. The Buddha teaches us all of this in those 184,000 suttas, an instruction book, rather than the reliance on, well, if I say 108 atipisos this afternoon, then it should be okay. Because it won't be. You've just wasted a lot of time. It's a nice practice to do. It's mindfulness. It's like a mantra. But this isn't the practice. The practice is sila, keeping moral virtue, samadhi, panya. So likewise, if you break sila, you can't keep 5 precepts, and you think by then chanting the Mangala Sutta, the Ratana Sutta, the Karyana Metta Sutta will make that okay. It won't. All you're doing is reminding yourself in those sutras when you're chanting them of their teachings, their contents, the highest blessings, the paritas, the protections, and also the way we can share metta and live our lives. These are reflections and they're teachings. They're not prayers, they're not hopes. We don't pray, we don't worship. You need to abandon that. That's the third fetter. It's the third rope. Well, you have just one rope, but it's the third part of that rope. Yes, there are 10 parts, 10 twines, if you like, to this rope, wrapped around to make a strong rope. It's the third of that rope that's holding that cow. And what's it making that cow doing? It's making that cow unnecessarily run around and around and around. Actually, it was going that way, clockwise. Very wise cow to go clockwise. Going like this, blowing steam out of its nose because it's so furious, looking like a bull. Why? It doesn't need to. It had just as much grass as the rest of the cows. Why? Because of these fetters that we're trying to cut, break, sever, in order to become a Sotapanna, a stream enterer. Having broken those three, Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view, and doubt, so understanding the Four Noble Truths and the characteristics of existence, and rites and rituals, realize that we're just learning, understanding the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, and the Sangha that we've taken refuge in is there to help us with that, by way of example, the way they live their lives. You look to the monks to see how they're living their lives, and even as a layperson you may not be able to live exactly like that. There are many aspects of it which you can employ in your own lives. So that's this first level of enlightenment, and the poor cow has still got 7 more twines to this rope to break through, which I'll quickly run through. So the next level stage of enlightenment they call Sakadagami. Now that means once returner. So really, if you think of stream enterer, this stream as being something we're going to cross, okay, we're just entering the stream with the first stage of enlightenment. The second stage of enlightenment they call once returner. So we go into the stream and we get to the other side being enlightenment or NIBBÄNA. But we're going to come back, because we've gone there, and we're going to come back because we still have fetters to break. We still have ties to samsara, which is this life of the cow running around furiously snorting its nose. So we're going to come back. That's Sakadagami. Then the next stage is Anagami, which is non-returner, and that means you get to the other side, but you're not going to come back to samsara. You'll continue your practice until such a time you can break the remaining continue to reduce and finally cut through the remaining fetters, ties, to become an arahant, which is fully enlightened being, whom eventually attains to NIBBÄNA, who stays on that island having crossed. So back to this stage of Sakadagami, in this time we start to reduce, not eradicate, not completely let go of or abandon. It's a slow process. This is why I don't talk much about these 2 interim stages of enlightenment, because they're stages on the way to arahantship. Sotapanna is a marked stage. Once you're a Sotapanna, you cannot break the precepts, you will practice meditation, and you will develop wisdom. There's no going back. Once you know that you are not this personality you think you are, once you have no doubt in the Four Noble Truths, and once you have abandoned rites and rituals, you cannot reverse that process. You're on your way to arahantship. The next stage is, however, a little bit more of a grey area. So once returner, Sakadagami, is where you start to erode, reduce sensual desire, as well as eroding and reducing ill will. So this is just reducing and eroding desire, in a way, in one word, because sensual desire and ill will, which are 2 of the 5 first of the 5 hindrances that are obstacles in our meditation, are what really prevent us also in everyday life becoming free from suffering in this lifetime or in each and every day. This is what is causing suffering. Wanting something we cannot have, or not excuse me, or not wanting something we have. So not wanting is a desire not to have, whereas wanting is the desire to have. So it's still desire, isn't it? So this Sakadagami part of once returner, this stage of enlightenment, is where you've considerably reduced those, but they're still there. So it's a little bit of a grey area, not so definable. However, in the next stage, so that's just 2 more of these twines to this rope holding our angry cow just over there in this field. And I'll give it a pat on the back today if it's friendly and say thank you for the Dharma talk, cow. In Anagami, so non-returner, we have absolutely eradicated sensual desire and ill will. So desire, again, desire to have something we haven't got, desire not to have something you've got, are eradicated. So the difference between once returner and non-returner, or Sakadagami and Anagami, is just that. We're working on it in the first, Sakadagami, once returner. We've achieved it in the second, Anagami, non-returner. We've eradicated desire, essentially. On eradication of desire, actually, we are practically almost enlightened, because this is the cause of suffering. And what is our job, our aim? To become free from suffering in this lifetime. Once you've got rid of desire, the root causes of that being greed, which is like sensual desire in its extreme form, hatred, which is ill will in extreme form, and delusion, which is ignorance, not understanding the Four Noble Truths, or anicca, dukkha, anatta, the faculties of existence, the characteristics of existence, being impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self, us not being in control, us not being these personalities. Once you've fully eradicated that, just desire, just call it that one thing for simplicity. Once there is no desire, you're practically enlightened, with the exception that you will still have, if you've done your counting, you will still have 5 more fetters to, you will still have 1, 2, 3, 4, it is 5, isn't it? Yeah, 5 more fetters to go, 5 more twines to this rope. And what are they? Well, these are what leads to and are arahantship. This is how you become an arahant, and this is quite considerably different. This is to actually, if I could sum it up, I would say to understand the principle that there is no what next. There is no what now. There is no becoming. There is no birth, there is no rebirth. But this isn't to be mistaken with non-existence or nihilism, I think they call it, extinguishing of awareness. It is to be aware that what is next is of no relevance. What is in the present moment is satisfactory when there is no desire, is joy, is bliss, is equanimity. The 7 factors of enlightenment will be here in this place, in this state where there is no desire. Actually, I have those 7 factors of enlightenment just here. So you will have absolute mindfulness, sati. You will have absolute quality of investigation into all of your experiences, vichaya. You will have a clear perception, sanya. You will have, no, I'm reading the wrong one. You will have this, you will have this energy, this virya, this to keep with your determinations to continue on this path towards Nibbāna. You will have joy, piti, happiness. You will have tranquility, pasadi, these are the Pali words. You will have absolute one-pointedness, focus, samadhi. And you will have, as I've just said, upekkha, equanimity. These are the 7 factors of enlightenment. Once you have extinguished, eradicated all desire. But you will still have thoughts of the past initially and thoughts of the future in terms of where did I come from, where will I go next. This too has to be, this is too a fetter, this has to be cut before you are free of this tie, like the cow in the field. So you have to abandon, let go of the idea of material rebirth, being reborn into another body. You also have to let go of the idea of immaterial rebirth, so the idea of heavenly realms or even hell realms, even being born as in the Tusita heavens of the angelic, beautiful realms of sensual pleasure. You have to let go of all idea of rebirth, both material and immaterial. These are the next 2. Then conceit. Now conceit isn't just I am better than you, it is also I am not as good as you. It works both ways. It is one of the last, as you see, in arahantship, one of the last, number 8, of the fetters for us to break, cut through. As long as there is any opinion, that's all it is, conceit, is an opinion of yourself. There is still an element of self. So although I said in the first instance one has to abandon this perception of self, Sakkaya Ditthi, that is very much in the literal sense, because of course whilst there is any conceit or opinion, there has to be something that there is conceit or opinion of, which can be attributed to some remnants of self. And arahantship, nibbana, is, as the Buddha's words put it, without remainder. There is no more self. There is no remainder of this existence. It's not extinguished either. Like a candle, the flame, you light another candle, the flame goes on, this flame goes out, but the flame continues, candle to candle, like this. This momentum is there. Until we break that final terror, the ninth being, I've got down here restlessness, but I don't think it's exactly that. Restlessness means being, let's say, a little frustrated, but it's still really having opinions of the past and of the future. Well, of course, nibbana is timeless. We come into a space of immediately in this present moment, here and now. When you can stay in the present moment, here and now, then you will have abandoned, you will have let go of any thoughts of the past and any thoughts of the future, and therefore will have no restlessness. And finally, in arahantship, the 10th is ignorance or delusion. So this final root cause of greed, hatred, delusion, ignorance, avijja, is full wisdom, full understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the practice, the Noble Eightfold Path, the characteristics of existence, and an absolute appreciation at this stage as an arahant of the way forward to and the experience of nibbana, which cannot be written down in a list and cannot be described because it is not of this conditioned existence. All things in this existence are conditioned and therefore impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of our control, whereas nibbana is unconditioned, which is why it's also called the experience of the deathless. It cannot die. Only conditioned things are impermanent and experience aging, sickness and death, whereas nibbana is neither permanent or impermanent. It is neither subject to time or not subject to time. It is neither one thing or another. It is nibbana. It is of its own nature. It is that island we've successfully navigated across the stream to stay. So the cow today, I hope, has had its feta released, and it will be grazing with equanimity in the field to the side of me there. It's not one of these because it was a brown cow. These were its friends, its sisters. But it will be grazing happily with contentment on its path towards nibbana. I think it needs to be reborn again into the human realm before that's going to happen. But this is just my a way of illustrating how really simple this path is, how really simple the Buddha's teachings are, even in relation to the attainment of arahantship through these various stages of anagami, sakadagami, from entering the stream at Sotapanna. This is what your aim should be, to enter the stream at Sotapanna within this lifetime, on your way to becoming free from suffering. And it's very easily seen as to what you need to do that. You need to drop this personality view, this understanding that you are it, I am this, pride, conceit, I am this person, I am successful, or I'm not successful, I'm bad, I'm poor, I'm a failure. Either way, it's a view. Abandon it, let it go. Any doubt you have whatsoever about the Four Noble Truths, the teachings of the Buddha, then go back to the beginning. Start again with Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and you soon will become free of doubt. And of course, rites and rituals, that's easy. Stop doing it if you're doing it for the wrong reason. Still continue your chanting when you know it's for reflection on the Buddha's teachings. Still continue your bowing to Buddha statues when you know it's because you're developing humility in yourself, as you are when you're bowing to senior monks, or if you're not a monk, to any monks. But you are developing qualities within yourselves, those parami. So even if you don't attain to arahantship in this lifetime, these will go forward with you into the next. not as understandable, tangible qualifications, all of that intellectual knowledge you have acquired in this lifetime will either be gone before you die or when you die, either through dementia or senility or Alzheimer's or something like that, or just plain old age and loss of memory, or at the point of death. Anything you've learnt, the entire Abhidharma in 15 languages, it doesn't matter, it doesn't figure, it's gone. But what will be there is the development of these wholesome qualities, and any reduction in unwholesome qualities in mind states will also go towards the development of these parami, these qualities of generosity, of patience, of concentration, of all of these things, energy, all of these things that are there will go through as qualities into your next rebirth. Now, even if you don't believe in rebirth, within this lifetime these things can be seen, experienced and benefited from. But when you do this practice, you will realize there is nothing to be believed about rebirth or previous lives. It's just there to be understood, because it's evident within your own practice and can be seen, as I actually spoke about, I think, in the last video. So go back to that if you haven't seen it, watch it. I hope there's something useful I've said here today, but if not, please just put it aside, let it go, and don't let it trouble you. If it's useful, please also share it, and thank you for watching. Namaste. Have a good day. I hope I haven't given myself another headache now, sitting in the sun like this for too long. But if I have, more time for meditation, I think I'll come back.